Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy, and welcome back to Retro Reviews. So this is our first pre-recorded review we've done. We're recording this on Monday. This will be going up as you're watching it right now on Wednesday. And this was kind of off the schedule because, we've been doing the Rocky films. We've gone into the Creed films as well. And this was your suggestion because you saw that there's a certain film coming out very soon. Well, sorry, review that we've got coming out soon. That's the 10-year anniversary of Tron Legacy, which makes you feel very old. I still, as of this recording, haven't seen Tron Legacy. And we thought, we've taken this opportunity with Retro Reviews to go back at some of these bigger franchises, some of these films that we've never talked about that we either love or we just want to go back and talk about them. And we've never really talked about Tron. And you love Legacy, and we'll get into that when we get onto the review for Tron Legacy. And this was a good opportunity for me, who hasn't seen either of them, to finally go and watch them. These have been recommended to me for years. So I finally watched Tron 1, so the original 1982 film directed by Steven Lisberger. And I will be getting onto Legacy very, very soon. But before we get into the review proper, we'll go over the socials really quickly, and then we'll dive into this thing.
Absolutely, guys. So, as we always say, the best way to find out when we're going to go live is to find us on our social medias. You might have seen a couple of posts in the build-up. These are it's not late notice, but, for Rocky, we've had 6 weeks to keep watching Rocky. We've had this planned for probably a month, I'd say, but we're being really cautious about sort of how we wanted to announce it, because if you haven't already guessed, December is rammed, and at the time of recording, there's plenty of films to catch up with. We've got a big announcement we're going to drop tomorrow, if you're watching it right now, on the Tron Legacy review, which is really weird because we've not even recorded Creed yet. But as we say, the best way to find out when we're going to do our videos is to find us on social. So Facebook, Cinema Savvy, Twitter @cinema_savvy. We do a lot of GIFs in the build-up to the day. So if you want to catch what we're doing, we normally advertise quite heavily in demand. So, and there's a lot of cool stuff on there. We're answering a lot more questions, bringing stuff out. If you enjoyed our Disney, video, which we did at the weekends, we've got a lot of people checking it out. So again, coincidental timing that we just happen to be, which we'll get into later, maybe reviewing the first original Disney IP, which I guess we'll get into maybe more so in Legacy, because I think Legacy's got more of the business side of it all. However, we are here to talk about the Tron. As the Blu-ray cover says, the original classic, and we want you guys to comment along with us throughout this video. This is pre-recorded, but we're going to be premiering it, so we'll have one of us on the chat, so we'll be able to answer your questions on there. We'll have a chat with you, but do help us, do like, comment, share, subscribe. If you're a fan of Tron, obviously do come back tomorrow for Tron Legacy. We've got a lot more to talk about in Tron Legacy, being completely honest with you all. However, this is what makes Tron interesting, because going in heavily, we always kind of start off with our initial thoughts on this film, our first time watching. You've explained this is brand new to you.
This morning. That's my first time watching the film. Over to your story.
Mine is, I went to the cinema to watch Tron Legacy, which I'll talk about on Tron Legacy review. And, I didn't, back in 2010, you could pirate things, but I didn't have this on Blu-ray. And after watching Tron Legacy, I would not own a Tron film that's not on Blu-ray. That's the snobbiness of me. I was like, I really want to watch the original Tron, but I can't find a way to buy it. And you didn't get Disney Plus back then either. Obviously, that's brand new. So I waited to watch this until so they released this on Blu-ray with Tron Legacy as a double pack. And it was during the Easter holidays. And I remember many people back then, how old was I? 2011, I was 14. I wasn't. I was almost 15, but I was 14. I remember cycling into town during the Easter break, like locking my bike up, going into a place called Head, which is basically what FOP, if you've seen them in London, one of them. And I was there at 9 a.m. for a Tron double Blu-ray box set. That's how much that meant to me. And I took this home and I watched this film first thing, because I'd never seen this. I'd heard things about it. I just didn't want to stream it online. I wanted this to look good because Tron Legacy looked good. And wow, it's very different looking to Tron Legacy. I think that's the politest way of saying it. My first time watching it, the first time going to it, I don't want to say I wasn't impressed. I didn't respect it. And that comes down the line later. That comes down to us older. Because I had Legacy in my head. I've kind of said this to you before we hit record. It'd be like me watching The Phantom Menace and then going to watch New Hope, which ultimately I did do. But it would have been like, oh, A New Hope doesn't look like The Phantom Menace at all. And I really struggled with this, and I didn't like this at the start. I just remember keep going back to Legacy, bought Legacy again on 3D Blu-ray, all that kind of stuff. And this one was one. And when I was at university, I saw it again. I was like, I'm doing this big study on development technology. We'll get to that slide. Tron had a really big part of it. So certainly I respect it a lot more as I got older. And then today was the third time I'd seen this one properly. Yeah, so I've got bits to say. I know straight away there'll be people that grew up with this, so I think age is a really important thing. I think it's a combination of your age, first time you watch it, and if you saw Legacy first or not. I think that's going to be a really big thing.
Well, I was going to say for me as well, like before I go into Legacy, I don't know if Legacy is going to explain why the grid looks like amazingly CGI'd now and it's updated. I don't know if they explain that in the film or if you just take it as a fact that this is a film that's been made 30 years after the original one and you just kind of run with it and it's meant to be the same place. But yeah, so even with Tron, like I knew it was this thing. It was mostly down to the look that I knew this thing. Like I knew what light cycles were. I knew the grid. That's basically the suits, the blue neon, which has always been a look that I've loved. And even when you see like any kind of like retro 80s thing, it always kind of usually starts off with a grid similar to the one that's underneath us right now on the background. But I remember sort of like my only brush in with Tron really was playing Kingdom Hearts 2 on PlayStation 2, and there's a Tron level on there, and you know it's all the Disney worlds and everything, and most of the Disney worlds, they're worlds that I'm familiar with, they're characters that I'm familiar with, and every time when I got to that Tron level, I was like, I don't know who the hell these characters are, I don't know what's going on. We've got like the MCP is like the final boss of the level. I don't know who this is. It's like a giant red face. So it was always one of those films that I kept putting on the back burner, like constantly put it back. And as I'm a fan of 80s films, and this is 82, one of the many sci-fi films that came out in 1982, all around the same moment.
July 82.
So originally, apparently, this was going to come out, I think, much earlier. Or I think it was still going to be 82, but earlier in that year. And it was going to go up against a Don Bluth animated film, which is a really good animated film, actually, called The Secret of Nim. And because Disney was scared about going up against an animated film, this was obviously, you know, into the, you know, like the 80s and the 90s, like the big push for animated films. They pushed it back to save themselves competition and accidentally pushed themselves into a window of, what was it, E.T., Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, Blade Runner, The Thing, and then this one as well. So, I mean, it was a great year for sci-fi films, but not a great year to reap the biggest box office, I don't think.
No, and I think everything you just mentioned came out in the space of 5 weeks, including Tron. Fun story. This came out 14 years to the day before I was born.
Oh, wow.
July the 9th. So, yeah, that's a little thing. It's a shame Tron Legacy wasn't. But, no, and this is the thing. This film has this... hype's a really unfair word to use it. It's the respect that it's a generational thing, that Tron was this... we're going inside a video game. Now, video games to us are very different than video games to the 1980s. Obviously, this is heavily... You've got Flynn's Arcade, you've got the arcade machines, you've got all this kind of things. Obviously, space paranoids is the term people say, but obviously that's built within Tron. That was Tron's own game of the light cycles, which is like Worm, I think they call it now and stuff. And as far as it goes, releasing this in the early 80s, it feels very 80s when you're outside of the grid. But if there was ever an era to go inside a computer game, like when computers were new, and I think that's why, like, some of the little development things I'm aware of is that the director, he basically knew that at the time, like, computer developers, they had this like inner clique where they were essentially all just nerds. That's really the thing of it. He wanted to make a film that could explore these developers and how they are maybe more fun. There's more to them than just being the people that sit in office all day on the computers. Now, again, jumping to the 80s, when you think of people in the computers in the 80s, you've got the giant glasses, you've got the really smart clothing, all of it. And we get that with these characters, but leading into it, obviously, this is where Flynn comes in with Jeff Bridges being probably, I'm going to say, one of his earlier roles, I would guess.
Yeah, I'm going to check. I know he did, oh God, what's it called? Star Child? Or, oh God, what's it called? That was around the early 80s. I'm just going to check now. It's Tron 82. Oh, he had a few roles before it. He had quite a few roles before it. Wow, yeah, going back all the way to like the 50s and the 70s. Yeah, but I think this was probably one of sort of like definitely in the popular consciousness and the cult following that it had, definitely one of the first, I think.
Yeah, and I think, and that's the big thing with this one. But before we get into the crux, we're going to talk sort of vaguely about the story, I guess. The big thing with this film isn't really the story. It's not really the characters. It's the environment. It's the world. It's the look. Everything about it comes from this, and I think that's why it is maybe harder not to get on a high horse for us. We like our films, you know. I'm quite honest. As long as I get entertained, I normally don't really care about what I watch. You know, I'll rather sit down and take the SARS prequels over 90% of other films that come out. it's just one of those things. However, with this one, I always really struggled with this. Now, not because the story, well, it is because that I just couldn't really get into the film itself, the world. I really struggled, and I think that's because of what I had seen in Legacy. And I think going into the synopsis, which I've stupidly closed down already because I'm going to be unprofessional. It's very weird doing these pre-recorded. This is the thing. We're so used to being live. So
We've got used to live, yeah.
Yeah, which is weird because most people are the way around. But a computer hacker is abducted into the digital world and forced to participate in gladiatorial games, but his only chance of escape is with the help of a heroic security program called Tron. That's the simplified story. That's really the opening half hour. And I guess this story, the synopsis, it's more of an adventure. It's take a peek into this world, go on this short story. We're going to cover everything: the flying vehicles, the motorbikes, the fighting, the combat, the tanks. We're going to explore all these things together like a video game, and then we'll bring you back to Earth at the end of it. And a lot of films do that. It is that kind of basic adventure thing. I'm trying to think of a really recent one that's not Tron Legacy that did something really similar. Ready Player One kind of.
Yeah.
It's that video game style type film. And yeah, I don't really know where to begin with this. How did you find the story? Because there's not much of a story, and to be fair, me being completely honest, it goes all over the place. It's incoherent. Yeah. I'm not watching it for the story, and it shows because I'm also not going back to this film often.
Well, like critiquing most films, this one no exception. It's complicated, and my thoughts on it are complicated. So inherently the story is just completely absurd, and it lost me. So inherently, when you break it down, like the actual story of it, what's going on, and the actual sort of situation with all the characters, you've got Jeff Bridges, who plays this video game programmer, who was this fantastic programmer, came up with all of these games. And the villain of the film, I think it's called Dillinger, isn't it? If I remember rightly. I only saw this movie this morning, so names are still a bit hazy for me. Dillinger plagiarized Jeff Bridges' ideas, formed this company, rose in the ranks, and somehow through creating video games has ties to like politics and world leaders and other world businesses. And I don't know how that works. So right then, I think it's like in the infancy of video games where people thought they were like these strange, like world-ending devices of control and everything. So right there, it kind of lost me a little bit. I was like, why is this business guy? He makes video games. Why is he like this V for Vendetta, like utopian leader or something? Yeah, but the ironic thing is that most people, especially with Tron, when you go into this Tron world, this is the spectacle. This is the world that you want to stay in. You don't want to leave it. It's like when you play the early Assassin's Creed games, it keeps snapping you out of those historical settings and this really boring modern stuff, which you don't want to play, and you just want to get back into like the animus, the video game world. And I kind of had the opposite effect with this film. I think the spectacle, I think the filmmakers thought, look at all these amazing things that we've never done before in film that we're throwing on screen, all of these fully rendered CGI things that you haven't really seen before in a film that are all very experimental and new. Are you dazzled? Are you thrilled? And I kind of wasn't. And I don't know if I would have been at the time as well, because here's the thing, like I know a lot of the, and like fair play to all the team on this, because I did read a little bit of the behind the scenes, and you know, I can't sort of verbalize everything that he did, but the meticulous process of getting this film even made. It was originally going to be an animated film that were in discussion. I think they actually sought help from a person who worked with computers so they could use correct terminology, and it all felt very technical. And a lot of the dialogue is based in that kind of technical garble, almost to the point where it's almost incomprehensible as to what's going on. But fair play to them for, you know, striving for that realism, at least in the dialogue and specifics of it. The processing, the post-processing, the you know, filming with black and white, filming on a black background, and adding all of these elements into it must have been like an absolute gargantuan task for everyone involved, and especially because they didn't really have any frame of reference of films that had really done this before. They must have had to have come up with new technologies, new ideas, which I'm sure would have then have been utilized in other films afterwards. So fair play to them on that. But I think this film inherently, more than anything, I didn't really care about the characters, and I think it doesn't really have much of a human element to it. I would have actually have liked if the film had maybe, and this might have helped the pace of the film, to break it up and to cut back to those human characters, to cut back to Bruce Boxleitner's character, Alan, as he's trying to, is at his computer in the real world, and he's doing some things around the, was it Encom, something in the real world to break the film up. But we spend so much of our time in the grid, and it's not particularly enthralling. It's not particularly exciting or adventurous. In fact, a lot of it's really slow. And every time I've seen these light cycle races, even from like shots of this, I thought, oh, this is going to be like, this is, like exciting action set piece. And it's so slow and it's so drawn out. And, the effects don't hold up by today, whether they would have done at the time. But here's the thing. A lot of people say, well, you have to remember the time that it was made. This was 1982. Even the films that I mentioned that this was going up against at the time, Blade Runner still holds up today, still looks incredible. Like some of the establishing shots at the beginning of Blade Runner, jaw hits the floor even to this day. I'm not a massive fan of the film, but even Star Trek Wrath of Khan, the practical effects in that still look second to none and look incredible to this day. This film, I don't know, that you've got like in even the rotoscoping, you've got like a lot of jagged edges that you see around where things are being composited onto other things. So it feels like a film that was ahead of its time, but the technology wasn't there to back it up. So that's why I'm really excited for Tron Legacy to see if this idea, this world, this imagination, which is a really imaginative idea, they finally nail it when the technology's 30 years later has caught up with it.
Yeah, and this is my thing as well, that you're in this for the world. So I spoke when I was at uni, I was doing that sort of study stuff. And the big thing with this, there's some really cool behind the scenes photos, if you guys haven't seen it. This was all shot in black and white when they're inside the grid. They literally have black and white background sets. The character costumes are in black and white as well. And they use like backlit animation, which I don't know if that was very new back then. It looks like it was new back then, or maybe it was early stages been tinkered with, but this is one of those first ones that ever extensively used an animation style like that. And it was combining that live action with animation. Because as you said, this was meant to be an animated film. And it just kind of makes you think like, oh, like, not, I know James the Giant Peach was 15 years later, but in James the Giant Peach, it's live action. And when they go into the peach, it becomes stop motion. And Tron almost feels like that when you go into the grid, it's like, oh, it's the weird colors and we get it. But I think when it's certainly people our age, is hard. I think at the time this was groundbreaking, more so for the CGI itself than the last image. It was like, this is this new thing they've done, and this is nothing. I mean, all those films you mentioned, they have all aged much better, absolutely. I think this was the one that's like, we're doing everything new that's not been done, that kind of style with the CGI. And it's exactly, you've probably hit the nail on the head there. It's trying to do something that's not been ready for 10 years. We spoke in our video, I can't remember if it was on Friday or Saturday for Mandalorian, that they discussed that George Lucas, he had the green screens, he developed digital, but his idea was to basically have the Mandalorian set, which is he wanted screens that had the footage on for him to put the actors in. But he had those ideas years before it could ever be a thing. The technology wasn't there. And that is exactly how I feel with Tron. We'll probably talk about more in Legacy. Even with the Mandalorian technology, doing a Tron film today would be far cheaper than probably in 2010 as well. And especially when you think the grid colors, black, neon, it's the color palette. There's so much potential, but that's for another video. But I'm the same with you. I struggle to get into the characters. As someone that saw Legacy first, it's like, oh, this is the film with Tron. We're going to see Tron, the warrior, the security program, and it doesn't really do anything.
Yeah. No, exactly. Yeah,
and it's like I've seen Tron Uprising as well, which is a phenomenal series. And in that series, Tron is the ultimate warrior. He has the reputation. Legacy goes into the warrior, the mythology, and this one's like, he was a security program, and he's designed to keep out. I love the things I really like actually is before you go into the grid, it's these little things, these little nuances like, oh, I've just developed this new program. It's called Tron, and it will like basically attach any dodgy. It's basically like a virus protection in 1982. Yeah. And that's basically who Tron is. And he doesn't really do anything in the film. And again, 14-year-old me is off the back of this like, oh, this isn't anything near what I thought this would be like. So I get those elements where I struggle. And even the character of Flynn, I'm not going to say anything about Legacy because I know you don't know much about it at all. I adore Jeff Bridges in the second film. I'm going to leave it at that because I don't know how much you even know, so I'm not even going to go into it. But as far as like a backstory goes, you don't even get a sense of that in this that leads into what this, to me, in polite honestness, feels like a prequel, and that's how I kind of see it. I'm so focused on Legacy being the front and center.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's because it's my original, and that feels rude. It's not the right term for it because it is a sequel. Is that age wasn't kind to this film, and the problems with this film are the story, they are the characters, the scripts. Really big comparisons to Star Wars 4 when they're chucking terminology in there that's not really a thing, and it's the Harrison Ford, George, you can write this shit, but you can't direct it.
Yeah.
And I get a lot of that. Even the most minuscule things, like there's a character called Ram. In 2020, we're like, aha, computers. In 1982, that's like a really like inside joke, probably to the highest level of inside jokes. They wouldn't be able to call anyone Ram today if it's a film about a computer. That being said, maybe I'm being too harsh on some of this, but even if the villains, you mentioned Dillinger earlier, you've got a British actor in there, and I think the director said in interviews before that it was the really obvious trait of bringing this excellent stage actor. I think he'd performed in Hamlet. I always forget his name. Is it David Warner?
David Warner. Yeah.
And he's great in this, but we want to see more of him in that Earth element, not inside the grid. And maybe because we're only seeing a portion of his face for the majority of it, he feels intimidating. He's doing well with his voice and stuff, but then the suits just don't look. It looks so.
They look like they made a cardboard, which they were.
Yeah, exactly. And there's this great show. I text you out. I think if anyone's seen it on Disney Plus, it's called. Is it the Prop Show or something like that? They basically go to Disney original franchises, and they have this collector that goes around America discussing. He clearly buys and sells it all. But for this Disney series, he's going to the actors, he's bringing in their props they've not seen in years, or he's exploring them. And they did one on Tron. And there's an incredible scene where you've got Bruce Boxleitner, who is reunited with the Tron suit for the first time since the 80s. And it's like, like it's like Lycra, and it's all like shredded because obviously it was just skin tight with lines in it that they would animate. Whereas we'll get to Legacy tomorrow, it's obviously modern technology and costumes. So they've got all this stuff built in. But yeah, I feel like I've been really harsh in this film, which isn't my case, but I'm not. My fandom from Tron Legacy comes from Tron Legacy more so than this, but I respect there will be people watching this at home who probably feel insulted. But I know that this will be an age thing. This will be, it's harder for probably people of our generation to watch it because we've not seen the development of these technologies, of computers, of that environment. And I feel that's a really big thing. But yeah, kind of jumping all over the place. I respect this more than I enjoy it. I think that's a really important term because I've got a tremendous amount of respect, but that isn't going to get me going back to watch a film multiple times.
Yeah, and you talked about like the history of computers as well. And when I was reading about the behind the scenes, there was this one line that jumped out to me in particular, which just shows how far we've come with computers. This is talking about how they had to limit the amount of detail they could have in the backgrounds of the environments and why they chose to go with mostly blacks because they could obscure a lot of detail and they didn't have to use as much data. So apparently, this is quoting off Wikipedia, the computer used had only 2 megabytes of memory. And no more than 330 megabyte of storage. This put a limit on the detail on the background. So that's why they had to kind of go with a more minimalistic style to it, which I guess works in hindsight. When you get to Legacy, there's more detail in it clearly, but it's mostly that very dark lit. You can obscure some things out in the background. And yeah, like you mentioned as well, David Warner, like I thought without a doubt he had the most presence in the film. I think that's just because he's a tremendous actor. Every time I kept seeing him in this, I was like, wouldn't it have been great as like an Imperial officer in Star Wars or something? Like he's very much that kind of, that stiff upper lip British, good villainous guy. Even the look of the suits actually kind of reminded me of, it's going to be all these other films that it reminds me of because I've only seen this today, but Superman the movie, the stuff on Krypton at the beginning, they have these it's very much of that like late 70s, early 80s sci-fi where they have these bright, garish costumes, which probably don't hold up all that great today. But it was that sort of like classic sci-fi look to it. So, and there are some themes in the story as well, which it doesn't really delve into. It would have been nice to see it go into more, but there's sort of like religious connotations as well about God and, a programmer and a user, and they see the programmers as these like godlike beings or users, sorry. And then there's also sort of like political control. You've got like this giant red face, this domineering face that controls everything and controls the grid, and everyone has to get in line and follow a certain series of rules. So there are ideas there, but none really sort of come to the forefront. Predominantly, this film is just a very slow, meandering adventure through this technology, and the technology doesn't look all that great, and the characters aren't all that interesting. The story isn't all that involved. So, I mean, it's weird that this film, out of anything, kind of tried to set up this franchise ultimately, which is kind of like failed in every single integer that it's come into it. You know, like Legacy, I haven't seen that, but that was clearly trying to set up like a big reboot and maybe get a third film out of it to complete some kind of trilogy.
And it got the money. It made the money. Everything. So we'll go into it on Legacy. Tomorrowland is the reason there was no Tron 3. Yeah. Which is I can't even.
They're completely separate. Yeah, they're completely separate things. So why should one have a knock on? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think with this one, sort of jumping off that as well, like it is a cult film, and I think that's the big thing, that you don't get cult status if you're not universally acclaimed and loved. I know that's a really like nasty thing to say, but if it was, I mean, this is a classic. It is a classic. Don't get me wrong, but this is a cult classic, and it's so niche because you can take a cult. Like, I'd say Leon's a cult classic. People that have seen it tend to love it. It's not a big hit. It's not a heavy hitter. It's an independent film, but anyone that's seen Leon probably loves it. Whereas with Tron's that super niche. Like, not anyone that's seen this is going to like it. You've got to be pretty specific to love this one. Maybe Legacy, and I'm in my own cloud of it being bigger than what it is. But I think with this film, I can't imagine people being neutral. I think you either probably really enjoy this one or you don't. One thing I want to talk about is the fact that obviously this did get put up for a couple of Oscars. It was up for Best Costume Design, which is incredible, and Best Sounds. And it didn't win either of them. However, 14 years later, they gave it like here's a technical achievement from 15 years ago type award thing. So
it wasn't even nominated for visual effects at the time. So
no, and that's that year is crazy, but that's the thing. It's more what came, not its legacy, because I don't mean there's a sequel. I mean like the legacy of this film. That's why it's so clearly the title of the sequel is this big domineering thing. But there's certainly a lot to look at in terms of what came after, what they tried to do, what did work, what didn't work, ideas they've explored. And of course, there is going to be another one starring Jared Leto, which I've got thoughts on. Actually, don't have an issue with Jared Leto. It's more we should have had Tron 3, but that's a conversation for tomorrow. That being said, we haven't really spoken about the music, and I'm also going to jump on the unfortunate negative train. I
was going to say we've been another negative things for this movie.
Yeah, I feel bad. It is, it would be like if you're. Oh no, that's really sad. Somewhere there's a Mandalorian fan that's never seen the original Star Wars films, and he's going to say he doesn't like John Williams' music. Now that's a really rich comparison. There's nothing like this, but I got to witness Daft Punk at an IMAX, and I became a Daft Punk fan off the back of this. A massive off the sequel. So when I saw this one, I was like, oh, the music's not as good. Of course, the technology didn't exist to make the soundtrack like that. And I know that this soundtrack is very well respected within fans. It's had a couple of vinyl releases, and it is one of those where it has, again, a cult following. But sorry, if anyone noticing my background keeps going yellow, it's really triggering me. I don't know if it's doing the same for you. But
entering the grid.
I know it's going to turn neon blue soon. But no, I did think that. But the music for me, I didn't get sold on the gravitas of Tron. And again, it's in that time where you've got your Blade Runner, your Vangelis, you've got your Star Wars, you've got your Star Treks, you've got ET, you've got so much stuff going around, and I just didn't feel like Tron to me. And that's again. That's through no fault of anyone, but the fact that this wasn't the one I watched first.
Yeah, no, exactly. And Wendy Carlos did the soundtrack for this thing, did a little bit of digging, did the soundtrack to Clockwork Orange and The Shining, which are some of the best synth scores out there, not at least main themes, maybe not so the entire film, but yeah, and I think mostly I'm used to Tron from the look of it, right? Like this whole, I do think absolutely. That definitely visually this had a knock-on effect with like a lot of sci-fi and how we perceive like that retro kind of sci-fi look to it. And when you look at something like that underneath, you're expecting some kind of like synth or like a pounding like beat for it and everything during these light sock things, and you don't get that with this film at all. In fact, I really hated the score for this film. It felt out of place. It felt corny, kooky, strangely whimsical, and not in a good way that would like link in with Tron or anyway. It just felt really out of place. It felt like it was in some kind of like wacky family comedy film kind of music. It didn't feel like it was part of Tron.
Yeah.
Now I haven't really listened to much Daft Punk, and I probably will start listening to more Daft Punk after I watch Legacy in a couple of days' time. But yeah, I've seen clips, and the soundtrack's what I would expect from. You mentioned Vangelis with Blade Runner, which is a great comparison there. Hearing the very small excerpt that I have from Tron Legacy, that is the kind of music that I would expect from a world like Tron. So that's one of the aspects that visually and like orally as well is what I'm really looking forward to watching when I get to Tron Legacy, because I think that will have nailed what the vision maybe was for this film. The technology just wasn't there to do it until another 30 years.
Yeah, and that's the thing. We've both probably been quite harsh, but that is a generational thing. But you're spot on again with it. It's when you think of that electronic environment, you think of modern day electronic music. Even someone like Ludwig Göransson, who's been able to put that into things like Star Wars, who's been able to put it in Black Panther, to a point. Creed, not to hype up our retro reviews. He does that sort of electronic-y things, and he applies normal music to it, and doesn't feel like that again in this film. And I think there's so many good ideas in this, and I'm not going to say it's execution. It's so restricted by the time that the fact they did make a sequel, fair play to Disney, because I mean today's Disney is very different to 1980s Disney. This Disney from this era declined to do Star Wars, and they ultimately ended up buying it 30 years later. We kind of, I guess the good way to end on sort of vaguely talking about the IP. This was one of their only original things. Even take away the theme park rides, we had no pirates anyway at this point. We don't have Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, as you mentioned. That became their own thing. Disney didn't really do franchises, and to a point, this was a one-off film. It wasn't sequels back then. I mean, from what I'd heard, it was a really tough post-production, obviously, this new technology. It was all right. I think it grossed $50 million off a $17 million budget, so it had a return. The critics were okay towards it. They just didn't like the plot, but they respected it. Again, this is groundbreaking stuff, but we don't really like the core of what's going on. And it did build up that following, which years down the line did push it to a second Tron film. And ironically, I think more so the outrage of not getting a sequel to Tron Legacy spurring them on to the third one, which is through no fault of Joseph Kosinski. So, yeah, I don't know if it's the right time to wrap up, but kind of overall for me, this is a film that I don't go back too often, but I have a tremendous amount of respect for what it did for the industry, for what it does to films. And it is a welcome addition to have something so out there, so different, so uncanny for that sci-fi things. However, it was done better. And it's like that whole Rocky 5 thing we discussed in our Rocky reviews, the Rocky Balboa thing, that we have the benefit of time and we have hindsight and we know what comes down the line, and you have to have this to get to that point. That if there hadn't been Tron Legacy, I probably still wouldn't have watched this film to this day, to be precisely honest. And I respect the fans of this who grew up with it, but unfortunately, it's just not something I'm keen on or with. And I want to see this universe explored via different mediums, which they have done, which we can talk about too.
See, and that surprised me. Like, before going into this, we said this before we went live today. I thought you loved this film, like this and Legacy back to back. So when I said before we went live that I didn't really care for this film, you were like, "No, mate, I'm exactly the same as you." I was like, "What? I thought you liked it. I thought you loved it. I thought that's why we were doing this thing in the first place." But no, if I'm going to give my final thoughts on it, just going back to the music, Journey do 2 songs for this film. They do a song called 1990s Theme, which is, I don't remember that one in the film, but the end credits song, Only Solutions. Journey are one of my favorite bands from the 70s and 80s. Apparently Supertramp were originally going to supply songs for it, and then Journey took over. But I love that song in the end credits. I will be listening to that later on tonight. But yeah, it's a film that's, I appreciate the concept more than anything else. The characters are light. Nothing really stood out to me in that regard. The effects, I don't even know if they would have held up at the time. I guess it was doing new things that hadn't been done in animation and combining live action with animation and the certain applications that they were doing that and achieving that. We always talk about CGI, and for some reason we always go with like, oh, well, Jurassic Park was the first film to do it. It's like, well, no, they were doing things earlier than that, even like as far back as 82 and probably even before that as well. So I appreciate what it was trying to do. I appreciate the passion, because it doesn't seem like this was an original idea. This was clearly like a spark that someone had, a film that they wanted to get made, and they did. So I appreciate that side of it, but it was just the story felt very sparse. It lacked that human element. That sort of it's always that character that I talk about, where you go into the world with them and you explore it through their eyes. They don't know about the world, and we're introduced to it through their eyes. It felt like it just kind of threw you in. And I was actually, at the beginning of the film, I was struggling to kind of understand what was going on with some of these characters and that we're introduced to. So I'm sure Legacy will do a better job of that. But even with Legacy, like, I'm sure it will look fantastic, especially compared to this one. But there will always be that, well, at least when this came out in 82, they didn't have all of these tools to play with, and they had to make what they could. So I do have that respect for it, but the film as a whole didn't really stand out to me. I don't know if I'll rush back to watch this one anytime soon. But as it was a film that I hadn't seen, a big one from the 80s, I am glad that I've watched it. I don't sort of like hate this movie by any stretch of the imagination. I just found it a little bit dull, but at least I can cross this one off now, and in a couple of days' time can cross Legacy off as well.
Definitely. I don't have anything else to add to that. What we're going to say, guys, is when you are watching this, come back tomorrow. If you're watching it later, it will already be on the channel. Our Tron Legacy review is coming on Thursday, the 17th of December. It's the 10th anniversary to the specific day of that film's release. Oh, wow. That's how timing is for this. We wanted to wait, but we realized we kind of couldn't. That's more on me than on Chris. So, yeah, again, we know that's coming tomorrow. We've got a Mandalorian review coming on Friday. We've our Creed 2 review coming out next week. And then we've got a big announcement we're going to make into the Tron Legacy review. Might even make during the start of the video, just to get you guys looking forward to, because there's not so many releases coming out right now, as we all know. That's the point of these retro reviews. It's you had a perfect thing when we're chatting online about it, that it just lets us do anything we want, whenever we want. There's sort of, we can schedule something, we can build up to something. We're not held back by anything. So that's the beauty of these reviews. It will be nice to talk Tron Legacy tomorrow on the channel. And as usual, the best way to find out when we're going to do these videos, what videos we're going to do, is finding us on Facebook, Cinema Savvy, Twitter at cinema_savvy. And we do have a link in the description to the TeePublic store. So that is everything I'm going to say. If you've got anything else to add?
Yeah, just a big thank you to everyone watching this. It feels so weird saying that when we're not live. And even right now, getting my head around when I will have watched these films, when we will have reviews out, it's kind of messing with my mind. But yeah, big thank you for everyone tuning in. And yeah, December's a packed month, so don't go anywhere. We'll see you next time.